What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Today I'm going to be breaking down how I went from 207 pounds at the peak of my bulk to 167 pounds at the peak of my cut, breaking down exactly how I got to that point, the A to Z, and how you can apply it to your own weight loss fitness journey, and hopefully the results are, comparable, similar, or the same. And so without further ado, let's get into it. So the thing is, when you bulk, right, and you get into a very fed, high body fat state, one thing you're going to notice is your hunger signaling and things like that are going to be kind of all out of whack, and you're going to be a body that has a kind of metabolism and appetite of somebody who is at that body weight. One great way of fixing that, which is something that you're going to have to do if you want to successfully cut down a good amount of weight, is you're going to have to kind of reacclimate that hormonal profile and reacclimate your appetite to a new body weight. And the way that you do that, right, this time around, that was something I incorporated, which I did not before, was fasting. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of shill fasting for a while in this video, because it was kind of a game changer this time around. A lot of folks are afraid of applying it in their own kind of journeys and their own workout regimens, because they're afraid of muscle loss, strength loss, and everything in between, because they think if they go a certain amount of time without food, it's all just going to dissipate, disappear, Thanos snap, and their gains are just freaking gone. But that's not actually what happens. And so when I let go of that fear and started incorporating things like 24-hour fasts, the weight loss became pretty damn easy, if I do say so myself. Now, the way that I would incorporate these fasting days is on the days that I would not train, I would do a 24-hour fast. And I have 2 rest days in a week, so that would be 2 24-hour fasts per week. For me, that always ended up being Monday and Friday. I would do a 24-hour fast. And by 24-hour fast, I'm not saying I went the whole day without eating. Typically, I would run into the issue of not being able to sleep, and if you do have that problem as well, you can just eat a small meal or a decently sized meal before going to bed. Regardless, you're going to be in a gigantic deficit. Now, that is what I did. Now, what that allowed me to do, essentially, was get into a gigantic deficit without really thinking much, okay? It's a dummy-proof way of getting into a very big deficit. During that time, did I experience any muscle loss? No. The reason why is that my resistance training never stopped. Me in the gym, I was still pushing hard. I was still at the same level of frequency, and I was still able to make progress and hit PRs. You can too. It really isn't, an impossible thing, but that's the benefit of having those 24-hour fasts on your rest days, so that on your training days, you can be properly fed and not worry about it. Now, that's one of the main things that I incorporate. Real quick, something that I forgot to mention also is during my fasting days, I would take a lot of caffeine, so coffee in the morning or an energy drink or something like that, to blunt the hunger out experience. And I forgot to mention that in the video, and that's something you should try out as well. It'll make it a lot easier if you can tolerate the caffeine. Of course, on my regular training days and days that I'm not fasting, my calories were also lower than they were previously. I always aim for a range. The things with your calories is you can't have like a static number. You do want to have a kind of like a range, because some days you're gonna be hungrier and some days you're not gonna be as hungry. And so some days you can get away with less, and some days you could probably get away with a little more. What matters is obviously the long term. And so my range was 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day is what I would aim for, which is a severe deficit for me, considering that at my peak bulk, I was putting away like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories every day pretty easy. Now, the reason why I could handle doing that, at least initially, was because I was starting from such a high point in terms of my body weight and body fat percentage, that I could take a hit like that, and it wasn't really much of an issue because I had so much fat to work with. So initially, guys, if you are at a similar position as me, those aggressive cutting measures are going to be pretty easy to apply, and it's not going to be as harsh on your body as somebody who's, say, like, I don't know, fucking starting from 15% body fat as opposed to 20% body fat in a situation like me. So that is what I was doing, and that was yielding me a fat loss rate some weeks of 6 pounds. Now, initially in those first couple weeks, obviously you're going to lose a lot of weight. That's going to be a lot of water. That's going to be, glycogen, things like that. You're holding on to carbs less. And so not all that is going to be fat. not all of that is going to be water, but it's going to be a combination of the two. And in the first initial week, I dropped about 8 pounds, and it was like 5 pounds after that, and then eventually it stabilized to 2.5 to 3 pounds per week, which is still a very aggressive rate, but just keep that in mind. It's not going to stay, insanely aggressive like that for the entire, point of that. Now, as I was incorporating those measures, keep in mind they are pretty stressful on the body and not something you can do all throughout this process. It took me a total of about 3.5 to 4 months to fully get through this cutting phase. And one thing I had to incorporate along the way were refeed weeks. And this is something that you're going to want to start using as well if you're going to embark on a legitimate long-term, cut. And this isn't something that you're just doing for, a month or two. Well, a month. What you're going to want to do is after 4 weeks of the fasting and the deficits on your regular days, you're going to want to throw in a week where you go back up to maintenance calories or into a slight surplus. During that entire week, you're able to start getting into a fed state again, lowering your cortisol levels, lowering the overall stress on your body so that you can get back into a more, feeling like a human being again. Because you're going to be pretty worn out by that 4-week period, at least I was. So unless you're somebody that, maybe you can handle it more, you can keep pushing it if you'd like. If you feel like you can keep going, by all means do your thing, buddy. But I recommend within that 4-week period, you incorporate that refeed week to kind of get back into the swing of things. It's like SpongeBob, he's like dehydrated in the sun, and then
I don't need it. I don't need it.
Boom, you're back up to, your regular jolly old self, and then boom, now you're ready to get back into the next phase. Now, after incorporating the fasting days in the initial 4 weeks, I personally stopped doing the fasting moving forward after that. What I did moving forward after that was because I had already gotten rid of kind of the initial 15, 20-ish pounds that I needed to get out of the way quick because, that stuff, it's not too hard since I was starting from such a high point. But the real game was the next, 15, 20 after that. And so once I got to about 180-ish pounds, getting from there to 167, I had to incorporate a more moderate approach. And so what I did was no longer 24-hour fasting days. I was just very much on top of my activity. Now, throughout this entire process, your activity is going to be pretty important. I should have touched on that a little earlier, but you should absolutely be getting a minimum of 10,000 steps in every single day. Now, this is a very easy variable under your control that you should absolutely be nailing on a day-to-day basis if you even remotely want to have success in any sort of a fat loss phase across the board. Your steps are going to be a freaking major contributor to how effective your dieting strategies are, because it makes the calorie deficit that much more effective and seamless throughout that process. And it's a low impact, low stress way of doing that. Now, a lot of you are going to wonder, oh, but how do I get my steps in? Well, walking, right? We all walk. But the thing is, nobody ever thinks of walking as a serious form of activity or a serious form of cardio, because it isn't something that has you sweating, breathing heavy, and on the ground. Truth is, the poison's in the dose with this one, guys. You may, walk for 15 minutes, it doesn't do much, but if you walk for 15 minutes, goddamn, 5 times throughout the day, that's over an hour, almost an hour and a half of walking you did. That's not nothing. That's like 7,000 steps right there. That's gonna make a difference. And one way you can easily incorporate walking into your daily routine is simply just waking up, at an early time in the day, getting out there and doing a little 30-minute walk, 40-minute walk, maybe an hour if you can push it that far. Typically, that's what I would do, right? I would do a walk right before work. And I work a full-time job, so it isn't the most impossible thing to incorporate. If you're working a full-time job, you should have, probably 30 minutes to an hour in the morning to dedicate to this, considering this is a big goal for you, I'm assuming, right? You can also do it after work, or say you're working a job that's relatively sedentary and you're sitting down a lot, find any excuse to get up and start moving around. Everybody has a step tracker in their phone, and everybody typically has their phone on them, so there really is no excuse to track this, and there's no excuse to nail this step. You should absolutely be getting 10,000, 12,000 steps a day. Me personally, I was getting anywhere from 12 to 20,000 almost on a daily basis, so my activity was up there, super spiked up there. In the gym, I would also incorporate incline walking as well for an hour. So I was doing pretty aggressive activity. You know, you don't necessarily have to go that far, but I was doing that. Now, that's going to be the game plan for the next 8 weeks here. And it's going to be about a 12-week phase for you to truly drop the amount of weight that I dropped if you're trying to go for a weight loss plan on that level. Say if you're on a regular, you know, fat loss phase, a cut's, you know, typically like 20 pounds, that first 4 weeks would have already had you covered, to be honest, if you stuck to it and were somehow able to get through that, you know, relatively easy. That would have been an aggressive mini cut and you'd be done already. And, you know, kudos to you. But if you want to go for that next 20 pounds, this is something that I recommend how you do it, is more of a moderate approach. Bump your calories up like a little bit. I was still going for about 2,000 to 2,200, 2,500 calories per day, but my activity was so high that it didn't matter. And it still dropped at a rate of 2.5 pounds per week, which is great. And so that ended up being the case pretty much every single week. I would lose that much weight. And then by the time week 12 rolled around, I was pretty happy with the way that I was looking. And if I'm being honest, I don't think I lost almost any muscle at all during that whole period. That being said, I didn't exactly get down to like insane leanness. I'm not like single digit or anything, and I don't plan on, you know, getting that lean unless I really have to, because if I'm being honest, I don't even necessarily even like being this light. It's just basically something I did to open up room for the next bulk. And so I can bulk more efficiently this time around and kind of enjoy a calorie surplus once again, which is what I'm doing now. I am back on the bulk, so you know, expect PRs, expect more videos on things like that moving forward. But I digress. When you embark on this journey, keep in mind that the progress is going to be pretty quick, and so you're never going to be at a loss for you know dopamine for seeing the progress on a week-to-week basis. But also keep in mind, your strength may take a hit, and when it does take a hit eventually, that's when a lot of people become squeamish about it. Now, keep in mind that your goal in this phase of your training is to literally lose weight and to look better in the mirror and get leaner overall. That is your goal. So if you are feeling kind of shittier in the gym, while it may not be all that great, and while it's not a good feeling to get weaker, keep in mind that it's an indicator that you're doing something right, because that's just a part of the process. Keep pushing hard, keep striving to maintain ground, but you're more than likely not going to be, you know, hitting PRs during this time, and that's completely okay. You need to shift gears and understand that your goal at this current moment in time is completely different to when you're bulking, maintaining, or anything in between, because right now your sole purpose is to just achieve a certain look, which is to be leaner. And if you're getting leaner, you are hitting your goal regardless of your strength in the gym. That's less important at the moment. And again, I experienced little to no muscle loss. I would assume the same will apply for you, because if you maintain your training routine and you fight hard to maintain ground, that tissue, that muscle tissue, is not going to have a reason to go away. That's kind of the whole point of this. You can't go through a fat loss phase and not work out and expect to look better at the end of the day. But if you go through a fat loss phase, work out, you know, pretty goddamn intensely all throughout that process, you're going to be just fine. You're not going to lose a lot of muscle. Some areas may be impacted more than others. I know in my case, the area that took a lot of the hit were my legs. Typically when I go into a cutting phase, that's just how it ends up being. And I, you know, was willing to eat that. I didn't really care too much. I know that I'll regain it quick enough, and you should keep that in mind as well. Anything you lose during this process, if anything at all, you can gain it back pretty quickly. Muscle memory is a beautiful thing, so it isn't even anything to worry all that much about. But I would say that's about all as far as what I did throughout that entire process. During the whole that process, my training looked, in terms of the split, it was an upper-lower rest, upper-lower arm day split. Because I love my arms. It's kind of the area that I try to specialize in and kind of get the most progress out of personally. And that's what my split looked like. Per session, I was doing anywhere between, you know, 5 to 6, sometimes 7 exercises, just depending on how much volume I could handle. So just to give you an idea of what kind of training I was doing during that time. And I was focusing on movements that weren't super body weight dependent, and I recommend you do the same. Even say if you're somebody who's like doing a lot of bench pressing, or you're a powerlifter type of person, This is going to be a tough time for you, and I would recommend that if you can, really just focus on other things. You could go into calisthenics, and so you're actually losing weight and getting better, which is a great way to kind of mentally trick yourself into thinking you're making progress, which technically you are. It's a great way to, you know, not lose morale. Or you can use like machine movements or movements that aren't as dependent on your body weight. And that's going to be hard for pressing movements, but I do recommend like alternatives. Say if you're somebody who's flat benching a lot, you could do like a hammer strength machine press, or you could do push-ups, dips. If you're doing overhead pressing, which like I was, and I did lose, you know, ground on that. But then I focused on the AD press, right, the anterior delt press with the bench set up to the highest setting, almost, to kind of get that same range of motion. And my weight, my strength on that was about the same, if not progressing. And so personally, those were the swap outs that I made during that period. But this video is kind of getting longer than I anticipated it to be. That is the A to Z. Let me break it down again. To incorporate into a fat loss phase properly and, you know, aggressively, and make it and get it done throughout that process, you want to incorporate things like fasting. You want your activity to be really high, and you want your calories to be, you know, properly tracked. Which is, I didn't touch on that too much in this video, but you do want to track your calories. Get a food scale. Come on, get a food scale. Don't be afraid to just track your calories. It takes a couple freaking seconds. It's not that difficult, and it's not that much of a freaking hurdle to get over. A lot of people overestimate how annoying it is to track their food. Like, bro, put a bowl on a freaking scale and then just weigh it out. Like, fucking takes like a minute. Relax, okay? Like, just do that, and you're gonna know how many calories is in the goddamn thing. That's invaluable knowledge. That's gonna help you so much in this process. Well, why are you complaining about it? Anyway, that, and then more than anything else, obviously, stick to it. Stick to it. Stay accountable. Every week at the same time, you want to take a progress photo and look at the previous week. Is progress being made? Yes, you're on the right track. Is progress not being made? No. Figure out what's wrong. And yeah, I guess that's all it really comes down to. That's what I did personally, and it worked out for me. I'm looking the best that I've ever looked. And yeah, going into this next bulk, it's about to get crazy. We'll see what this next cut brings us to. I might even push it even further that time around. But that being said, guys, thanks for tuning into the video. Hopefully this has been of some value to you, and hopefully this is something that, you know, changes the game for you if you've been trying and failing at this cutting thing. But yeah, you have a great rest of your day. Like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, bye!